The city was alive with neon, yet Adrian felt like a ghost. His shoes tapped against the rain-slick pavement, echoing through streets that seemed emptier than his own chest. The world moved around him, laughter spilling from bars, couples locking hands, cars rushing past, but none of it touched him. He was walking alone, not because he wanted to, but because the one person who should have been beside him had stopped noticing whether he came home at all. Marcus, the man he had called his partner for years. Reliable, yes. Stable, yes. But love? Lately it had felt more like endurance than intimacy. Conversations had withered into reminders, kisses into habits, nights into silence. Adrian carried the weight of being unwanted, unchosen, unseen. And so, he walked. Tonight, however, the streets were not as empty as they seemed. A black car, a machine of polish and power, rolled slowly beside him, its engine humming like a predator's purr. The tinted window slid down, revealing a man whose presence seemed carved out of wealth itself. Sharp jawline, tailored suit, eyes that did not merely look but appraised. Need a ride? The voice was deep, rich, and unapologetically confident. Adrian hesitated. He should have kept walking. He should have said no. But something in that gaze stopped him. Something piercing, magnetic, dangerous. "I'm fine," Adrian replied, though his voice lacked conviction. The stranger smirked. "You don't look fine. You look lost." The word landed with more accuracy than Adrian cared to admit. Lost. Yes. He had been lost for months, lost in his own home, lost in Marcus's absence, lost in the silence of nights spent staring at the ceiling. And here was a man, a complete stranger, who saw it in a single glance. "I'm Damien," the man said, leaning just enough for Adrian to notice the glint of his watch, the way power seemed to drip from him like cologne. "And you are?" "Adrian," he answered, almost breathless. "Adrian," Damien repeated, tasting the syllables as if they mattered. "Get in. The streets aren't meant for someone like you." Adrian's pulse quickened. He looked around, the city lights, the faceless crowd, the emptiness he would return to if he refused. He thought of Marcus, of loyalty, of the promise of permanence. But what good was permanence if it starved him? If it turned him invisible? He opened the car door. The interior was a cocoon of leather and low-lit luxury. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the faint aroma of whiskey. Damien drove with the ease of a man who owned not just the road but the city itself. Yet his eyes, whenever they flicked toward Adrian, were not casual. They lingered, as if Adrian were more valuable than the skyline rushing past. "You don't belong out there," Damien said after a long silence. "You belong somewhere you're wanted." Adrian swallowed. "And you think that's with you?" Damien chuckled softly, but there was no mockery in it. "I don't think. I know." The words were bold. Too bold. Yet instead of recoiling, Adrian felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, the pulse of being desired. Their hands brushed against each other on the leather seat, deliberately or not Adrian couldn't tell. The touch was small, fleeting, but electric, a warning and a promise all at once. Adrian shifted in his seat, battling himself. "This is wrong. This is betrayal. Marcus." His conscience shouted, but his body was already leaning into the warmth of Damien's presence, craving more of the attention Marcus no longer gave. The car slowed, gliding through iron gates that opened to a mansion glowing against the night. Marble pillars, manicured lawns, and windows lit like invitations. Adrian's mouth parted slightly in awe. He had never seen such a home, not up close, not as something he could step into. "Come in," Damien said simply, as if it were inevitable. Adrian stood at the threshold, staring at the grand doors, the reflection of his own uncertainty staring back at him. He thought of Marcus again, working late, dismissing their missed dinners, offering pecks on the cheek instead of passion. Would Marcus even notice if Adrian didn't come home tonight? Would he care? And then there was Damien, a stranger who already looked at him with more intensity than Marcus had in months. A man who radiated power, danger, and desire. A man whose invitation wasn't just to enter a mansion, but to step into a different version of himself, the wanted version. Adrian's heart thundered in his chest as he crossed the threshold. The door shut behind him with a finality that sounded like a lock snapping into place. The mansion swallowed Adrian whole. The doors closed behind him, muffling the city's noise, and he was left in a space that seemed designed to seduce. Polished marble floors gleamed under soft golden lights. Paintings lined the walls, faces of strangers, frozen in time, staring at him like silent witnesses. Everything here spoke of wealth, control, and power. Damien walked ahead with the confidence of a man who never asked permission. His suit clung to broad shoulders, his stride unhurried, his presence magnetic. Adrian followed, his steps hesitant but unwilling to stop. Each second inside deepened the sense that he was no longer just visiting. He was trespassing into a life that wasn't his. "Drink?" Damien asked, stopping before a crystal bar cart. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses without waiting for an answer, handing one to Adrian. Their fingers touched as the glass was exchanged, lingering a fraction longer than necessary. Adrian took a sip. The liquor burned his throat, but the warmth of Damien's hand brushing his own burned deeper. "You live here alone?" Adrian asked, voice uneven. Damien leaned against the bar, watching him with eyes that dissected and devoured. "Alone, yes. But never lonely. I take what I want. That way, nothing is missing." The words landed heavy. Adrian thought of Marcus again. His predictability, his absence, his neglect. The love that had once been fierce had cooled into routine, leaving Adrian starved for attention. And here was Damien, a man who made no apologies for wanting, who spoke as if desire was not shame but truth. Damien moved closer. "Tell me, Adrian, what are you missing?" Adrian hesitated. He should have said nothing. He should have walked out. But Damien's voice cut through his defenses like a blade. I don't know," Adrian whispered. "Yes, you do," Damien said, lowering his tone. "You're missing someone who sees you. Someone who listens. Someone who makes you feel alive." The words were not just observations, they were temptations. Adrian felt his pulse racing. He could hear his own breath, shallow, betraying him. Damien set his glass down and reached for Adrian's chin, lifting it gently until their eyes locked. The room seemed to shrink, the distance between them collapsing into a charged silence. "Marcus doesn't see you anymore, does he?" Damien asked, voice smooth but cutting. Adrian's chest tightened. He wanted to deny it, to defend Marcus, but the truth was too heavy. "No," he admitted. Damien smiled faintly, victory glinting in his eyes. "Then why waste your time on someone blind?" The kiss came before Adrian could think. Damien's lips pressed against his, firm, deliberate, unapologetic. Adrian froze at first, his mind screaming betrayal. But his body betrayed him faster. The taste of whiskey, the heat of Damien's breath, the hunger behind the kiss, it shattered his restraint. He kissed back. It was not gentle. It was not patient. It was fire and surrender, a collision of need and guilt. Adrian's hands trembled as they clutched Damien's suit, pulling him closer, forgetting for a moment that Marcus even existed. The kiss broke, but only long enough for Damien to murmur, "See? You're alive with me." Adrian's heart pounded. "This is wrong." "Wrong," Damien whispered against his lips. "Or irresistible?" The question silenced him. He knew the answer, even if he refused to speak it. Damien led him through the mansion's hallways, past doors and staircases, until they reached a bedroom larger than Adrian's entire apartment. The bed was an ocean of silk and shadows, waiting. Adrian hesitated at the threshold, guilt flooding back. He pictured Marcus, home, probably asleep, unaware of the betrayal unfolding. His conscience screamed stop. But Damien's hand on his lower back pushed him gently but firmly forward. "You don't have to keep starving yourself," Damien said softly. Not when I can give you everything you've been denied. The words were a spell, and Adrian let them bind him. The room filled with the rustle of fabric, the heat of skin, the weight of unspoken need. The details were faceless, but the emotions were undeniable: desperation, hunger, release. Each touch was a betrayal. Each breath was an admission. For Adrian, it was more than physical. It was validation, a reminder that he could still be wanted, that he wasn't invisible. For Damien, it was conquest, another man pulled into his orbit, another hunger satisfied. When it was over, Adrian lay on the silk sheets, staring at the ceiling. The city lights filtered through tall windows, mocking him with their cold glow. His chest rose and fell quickly, but his thoughts were heavier than his breath. He had crossed a line. Marcus's face returned to him, not as the lover he once adored, but as the man he had betrayed. Shame gnawed at him, but so did a dangerous exhilaration. He had never felt so alive, so desired, so consumed. Beside him, Damien poured another glass of whiskey, as calm as if nothing had shifted. "You belong here," he said simply, handing Adrian the drink. Adrian took it, but his hands shook. He couldn't answer. He couldn't even trust his own voice. The silence grew thick between them. Adrian wanted to speak, to confess, to explain, but there were no words for what he had just done. Instead, he drank. The burn of whiskey was easier than the burn of guilt. He turned his head, watching the city skyline through the glass windows, knowing Marcus was somewhere out there, unaware. A part of Adrian wanted to run back, to pretend none of this happened. Another part wanted to sink deeper into Damien's world, where desire was not rationed but devoured. He closed his eyes, torn between two lives, and as sleep crept over him, the only truth he clung to was this: nothing would ever be the same. The morning after felt like a crime scene. Adrian slipped into his own apartment at dawn, his clothes still carrying Damien's scent, his mind tangled with guilt. Marcus was asleep on the couch, laptop open on his chest, the glow of unfinished work dimming against his tired face. Adrian froze, staring at him, the man who had once been his whole world. For a brief, aching second, he wanted to crawl into Marcus's arms, confess everything, beg for forgiveness. But instead, he tiptoed to the bedroom, carrying silence like a weapon. When Marcus stirred hours later, he greeted Adrian with a distracted smile. "You're up early," he muttered, rubbing his eyes, unaware of the betrayal already lodged in their bed. Adrian forced a smile back. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." The lie tasted bitter, but Marcus didn't question it. He never did. And that, Adrian realized with a hollow pang, was part of the problem. Days turned into a rhythm of deceit. Adrian invented excuses: late walks, sudden errands, meaningless plans, all to slip away into Damien's orbit. Each visit was intoxicating. Damien's world was one of luxury and fire, every glance charged, every touch unapologetic. With him, Adrian felt like the center of gravity, wanted with a force that left him gasping. But with every stolen night came mornings filled with dread. Adrian watched Marcus pour coffee, watched him tie his tie, watched him sit across the table as if nothing were amiss. The contrast shredded Adrian inside, one life steady but empty, the other thrilling but corrupt. Marcus, however, was not blind. Not anymore. One evening, Marcus closed his laptop and studied Adrian carefully. "You've been different lately," he said. His tone was even, but suspicion lurked beneath it. "Where do you go all the time?" Adrian's stomach clenched. He had rehearsed lies, but under Marcus's gaze, they tangled on his tongue. "Just clearing my head. Walking. You know. Every night." Marcus pressed. Adrian forced a laugh, too sharp to sound natural. "Yeah. You've been so busy, I just need space." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't push further. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. That night, when Adrian slipped into Damien's bed, guilt hit harder than desire. Yet Damien's arms closed around him, and the shame melted under the rush of being wanted. Adrian hated himself for craving it, but he couldn't stop. Damien had become more than a distraction, he had become an addiction. You think about him when you're here? Damien asked one night, his voice low, probing. Adrian stiffened. Sometimes. Damien smirked. Good. Let him haunt you. It only makes you mine more completely. The words unsettled Adrian. Damien wasn't offering love, he was claiming ownership. But Adrian stayed anyway, tangled in sheets and secrets, feeding a hunger he couldn't quiet. Back home, Marcus began noticing details. The faint scent of cologne that wasn't his. The expensive cufflink Adrian hadn't bought. A subtle shift in the way Adrian avoided his touch. One evening, as Adrian changed clothes, Marcus's voice cut through the air. Where did you get that? Adrian froze, following Marcus's eyes to the silk scarf draped carelessly over a chair, Damien's gift, left behind in haste. His mouth went dry. Oh, that? Just something I picked up. Marcus stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Really? Because it looks like something I've seen in magazines. Something I know you couldn't afford. The silence stretched, sharp and dangerous. Adrian forced a smile, shaky. You don't trust me? Marcus studied him for a long moment, then turned away. I don't know, he admitted quietly. The words pierced deeper than accusation. Marcus's doubt was more painful than any shouted anger, and Adrian felt himself unravel. That night, lying beside Marcus, Adrian stared at the ceiling, guilt heavy as lead. Marcus's steady breathing was a reminder of the man he had once loved so fiercely. Yet, when his phone buzzed with Damien's name flashing across the screen, his chest ignited with a different kind of fire. He slipped out of bed, whispering a lie about needing air, and walked straight into Damien's arms once more. Each choice pulled him further from Marcus, further into a world of shadows where lies multiplied and truth became unbearable. He told himself he could stop. He told himself this was temporary. But every time Damien touched him, every time Damien whispered mine, Adrian surrendered again. By the end of the week, Marcus's suspicion had hardened into certainty. He found another gift, tucked carelessly into Adrian's drawer, a watch gleaming with luxury. Not his own. Not bought with Adrian's money. Proof. When Marcus held it in his hand, the quiet devastation in his eyes was worse than rage. The confrontation hadn't yet come, but Adrian felt it looming, inevitable as a storm. Still, he went back to Damien, because the hunger was stronger than the fear. And in that surrender, Adrian knew, the web of lies was tightening, and soon it would strangle him. End of section 3. The confrontation came not with shouting, but with silence. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the watch glinting in his hand like a weapon. His eyes were steady, too steady, and his face was carved with the kind of restraint that hurts more than rage. Adrian froze in the doorway, his pulse hammering. He didn't need to ask how much Marcus knew. The watch said enough. Whose is this? Marcus's voice was quiet, stripped of warmth. Adrian's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no lie came. The air between them was already poisoned with truth. I wanted to believe you, Marcus continued, his hand trembling though his tone did not. I told myself you were just tired, just distant, that we could fix it. But you're not here anymore, Adrian. You've been somewhere else. With someone else. Each word cut deeper than a blade. Adrian stepped forward, desperate. Marcus, I don't, Marcus snapped, his composure breaking for the first time. His eyes glistened with betrayal. Don't lie to me again. Not now. Adrian's chest caved. He had imagined anger, maybe accusations, but not this quiet devastation. It was worse than fury. It was the sound of love collapsing. I didn't mean to. But you did, Marcus interrupted. His voice cracked, raw and human. You let someone else touch what was ours. You gave him the pieces of you that I thought belonged to me. The room went still. Adrian's excuses shriveled on his tongue. There was no way to defend what he had done. Marcus set the watch on the table with finality. I can't be with someone who chooses someone else every night. I won't. The words were final. Marcus stood, walked past him, and closed the bedroom door without another glance. Adrian remained rooted, hollow. He wanted to scream, to beg, to fall on his knees, but his legs wouldn't move. He had lost Marcus. Maybe not officially, not yet, but the love in his eyes was gone. And once gone, it would never return. That night, Adrian fled to Damien. The mansion loomed like salvation, its lights spilling warmth into the night. He pounded on the door, his desperation spilling out in ragged breaths. When Damien opened it, Adrian collapsed into him, seeking comfort, seeking meaning, seeking anything. He knows, Adrian whispered. Marcus knows everything. Damien's expression didn't shift. No pity, no alarm, not even surprise. He led Adrian inside, poured him a drink, and sat across from him with a cool detachment. And what now? Damien asked. Adrian blinked. What do you mean? Damien swirled his glass lazily. Do you expect me to fix this? To play the replacement? The words stung. I thought we had something. Damien laughed softly, not cruel but dismissive. We had nights, Adrian. We had passion. But love. He shook his head. Love was never promised. The floor beneath Adrian seemed to vanish. So I ruined everything for nothing? Not for nothing, Damien corrected smoothly. For desire. For the thrill. Don't look at me like I tricked you. You walked into this house. You chose it. Adrian's hands trembled around the glass. He wanted to argue, to demand that Damien care, but deep down he knew the truth. Damien had only ever wanted conquest, not permanence. The silence between them was suffocating. Adrian rose, setting the untouched drink down. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't do this. Damien only shrugged. Then don't. The dismissal was colder than any rejection Adrian had ever known. He walked out of the mansion alone. The night was quiet, the streets wet with rain, just as they had been the night he first met Damien. Only now, the city felt heavier, more hostile. He had no one waiting at home, no one to call, no one to hold. Marcus was gone, Damien had never truly been his, and Adrian himself felt emptied of everything but regret. He wandered aimlessly, his reflection rippling in puddles, neon lights painting him in fractured colors. He thought of Marcus's eyes, filled with hurt. He thought of Damien's voice, cold with truth. He thought of himself, trapped in the ruins of choices he couldn't undo. Loneliness wrapped around him tighter than ever before. For the first time, Adrian realized the price of infidelity wasn't just guilt. It was emptiness. It was losing both the love he once had and the illusion he had chased. He stopped under a flickering streetlight, the world around him blurred with rain. His chest ached, but not from desire anymore. From loss. From the knowledge that he had burned everything for a fire that refused to last. The city moved on without him. Cars rushing, strangers laughing, windows glowing, but Adrian remained still, a shadow among lights. The story of Marcus and Damien was over. What remained was silence. And in that silence, Adrian finally understood. Passion may ignite the night, but betrayal leaves only ashes.